I'll give you a quick introduction. My name's Serena. I'm 38 years old. I've been a member of Club Soda for just over a year, I think it was. I basically stumbled upon the group. I was nosing about on Facebook to try and find something, a community really, to help me being sober. And I did literally stumble across the group. I think it only had under 500 members at the time. There weren't many of us. And I joined and I made some really good friends. And here I am now. Oh, isn't this exciting? So today, basically, what I'm going to do is tell you my story, essentially. I'll tell you a little bit about when I was younger, about when I got older and I started drinking, and about where I am now. Just before I start, for anyone who doesn't know me, I am an alcoholic. So obviously, my story is going to be a little bit different to other people's. If you're not, obviously in Club Soda, we have people who are moderating, who are wanting to cut down. So don't think, oh, she's an alcoholic, I've got nothing to learn from this, because obviously when you talk about feelings and stuff like that, hopefully you'll get a little bit of sort of, little bit of identification with some of the things that I'm going to say. If you don't, it's just a story to listen to, isn't it? I'm not going to take questions right now, because I don't think I could read and answer and talk at the same time. It's far too confusing. But if you've got anything you want to ask me afterwards, just send me a message on Club Soda or send me a message on Messenger, anything like that. I'll be happy to answer any questions. So here we go. As I said, I'm 38. I was born on the Wirral, which is the other side of the River Mersey to Liverpool. I've got one older sister who's 6 years older than me, and there's my mum and dad who are very happily married. They've been married for 40 plus years now, I think. I can't remember exactly how many. And it was a very nice childhood, which always confused me when I started to have problems with drinking, because I assumed that to have an alcohol problem you should have a traumatic past or something terrible should have happened to you, and none of that has happened to me. Everything had been great, and I really searched for a reason that I could say, oh, I was traumatised, and I just wasn't. The only thing I can think of when I was little that stands out to me is that I was incredibly shy. My older sister was very outgoing. She would talk to absolutely anybody, but I was just, I don't know what it was. I just was very shy around people. I wouldn't speak. I was fine at home with my family, very chatty there, but as soon as we went outside or I went to nursery, I would just clam up. I'd be mute, essentially. I was quite insular even then. My sister taught me to read when I was really young, about 2, I think. When she taught me to read comics, she used to read the Beano with me and taught me to read. And I'd much rather read a book than speak to people. I'm still similar to that now. So obviously when I started at primary school, it was a little bit of a problem. I found it really hard to make friends because I was so shy. I didn't know how to approach people. But eventually one girl who was in my year, Roz, who was very outgoing, she came up to me and we made best friends for life, as you do when you're 5. We went everywhere together. Well, I used to follow her around because I thought she was wonderful. And one day we fell out over something. I don't know what 5-year-old girls fall out over, but we fell out over something, and she stopped talking to me. And not only did she stop talking to me, she stopped all the other little kids in the class talking to me. Now, I don't know if that was for an hour or whether it was for a day. I don't think it was longer than a day. But I remember it really clearly because it was the first time that I felt unworthy. The first time I remember thinking, nobody likes you, you're no good, no one's ever going to like you, why do you even bother? I distinctly remember feeling like that at age 5. Now, obviously, when you're 5, you don't go home after primary school and say to your parents, I'm having some bad feelings here, I'd like to talk about it. So I just sort of ignored it. But it took root, I think, that day, that feeling of insecurity, of not being good enough, of never being good enough. And that's why I think I remember it so much. Now, obviously, Ros and I made up and I went on. But as I said, that grew in me. And I learned really quickly and at a really young age that to me, to have people like me was more important than anything else. So when I was really little, I made this sort of little plan. What I'd do was I'd make friends with the people who were really confident and really popular. So then I would feel popular, that's what I thought. And in school, I knew I was good at school, so I thought if I was really good at school and was top of the class at everything, then the teachers would like me. So if all the kids liked me and all the teachers liked me, then everything would be all right, and that voice that told me I wasn't good enough would go away. That was my plan, and that's what I did. But obviously, although I put on a good front, that voice was always there. I was always very insecure and very anxious about lots of things. Things that didn't seem to bother other people, like putting your hand up in class, absolutely terrified me. Answering a question, I was gripped with fear that if I got it wrong, everyone would laugh at me. So I had that kind of thing from a very young age, but I also had the ability to hide it so people didn't realise that's how I felt. So I went on through school, went into high school, doing the same thing, making friends with all the people I knew were popular, so I would be popular, being good at everything, top of every class. I was sort of captain of sports teams, I was in the school plays. Looking back, I was probably really annoying. And I was quite happy to go along with that. I thought everybody felt inside how I did. I thought everybody was kind of faking it a bit. And then when I was about 12, I found out that my sister, who I was really close to, was taking drugs. I found out she was a heroin addict. A boyfriend had got her into heroin. She was 18 at the time, so I would have been 12. I didn't find out because my parents sat down to talk to me or anything like that. I found out the way you do when you're that age. I listened in on conversations, I listened round doors, I listened to sort of my parents muttering to each other, that kind of thing. My sister would go missing for about 6 months at a time. Sorry if I look a bit distracted here, because my cat's just appeared behind the phone and I'm sure she's going to knock everything over. Yeah, she'd disappear for 6 months at a time. And then, excuse me a second, get off. That was my cat, everyone. Yeah, she'd disappear for 6 months at a time. And then when she would appear, you'd have to sort of nail stuff down so she didn't steal it. I remember one night waking up about 3 o'clock in the morning, it was pitch black in my room, and she was crawling across my bedroom floor to steal a bag with money in it. So that's what it was like with my sister. And again, I didn't talk to anyone about that. It was a really frightening time and a really confusing time. But I didn't speak about anything. I didn't talk to my parents. They obviously hadn't spoken to me about it. I didn't tell any of my friends at all. I didn't want them to know that there was anything going on behind this perfect thing. And I just pushed everything down. That's what I did. Every feeling I had, I pushed down. And I carried on like that. I was head girl in school. I was expected to do really well. I went into sixth form college and I was doing my A-levels. And I was predicted to get I think I was predicted 3 A's at A-levels. I had an offer to study at Warwick, and I had to get 3 B's. And when we came to get results, I got 2 A's and a B, and I got rejected from Warwick, which, looking back now, shouldn't have been a big deal. But because I built this house of cards for myself, everything about me depended on how other people saw me. I didn't have any self-worth myself. Everything was really dependent upon how other people saw me. They had to see me as successful. They had to see me as popular. They had to see me as confident. So when I saw it, failed at something, it was like that voice that was inside me that said, you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. It's like it was right. And it was like it then got louder. So I went through clearing and I ended up going to Goldsmiths in London. I went to university down there. But by the time I got there, as I say, I'd lost all confidence in myself. The one thing I'd had was like my academic side. I'd always been really good at it. It felt like I'd lost that. I remember going to the first lecture, an English literature lecture, and I didn't understand what was going on. It felt like everyone had taken an extra exam after A-levels and I didn't have a clue. And I didn't ask. I didn't go up to my lecturer and say, I'm really confused and, I've lost a bit of confidence. I didn't go to my tutor and say I'm struggling a bit. What I did was kind of change how I decided people would perceive me. I decided to put a different mask on. Instead of the perfect one, I just kind of skim by. I started going out more. I started going to student union with everyone. I'd drunk by then. It wasn't a problem at this stage. I could take or leave it. And it wasn't something that I saw as would ever be a problem. While I was at uni, I got my first boyfriend. And after about a year, he finished with me. We'd been out the night before and stayed at my flat with my flatmates, and in the morning he dumped me and said I was too clingy, which to be honest was probably right. I was so insecure. So he walked out, and I remember I was sitting on the stairs crying hysterically, as you do when you're 18 and you've just been dumped. And one of my flatmates said to me, I know it's early, it was about 8:30 in the morning, but I've got a bottle of wine in the fridge, shall we open it? So we did, and we drank the bottle of wine. And it's so strange, I remember that day so clearly because it was like a switch flicked in my brain. And literally from that day, I started to drink every day. And I look back on it and I think I must have known straight away I was doing something slightly different because I hid it straight away. I wasn't sort of going out and doing it. I was drinking at home when my flatmates were out. I'd wait for them to go out and I'd go and buy a bottle of wine. I'd sort of have one glass and then another one throughout the day. But I just sort of ignored it because I thought, well, you know, I've just been broken up. I'm just going through it all. Sort of dismissed it. And it took about 6 months till I woke up one day and I was physically shaking really badly. I felt really sick and I knew that I needed a drink. It wasn't just a hangover, I needed a drink. And I walked for miles. I remember I lived in Lewisham at the time in South London, and I walked to a shop in Blackheath, so it was a bit of a trek when I was feeling terrible. And I got there about 8:30 in the morning and I asked for a bottle of wine, and the guy behind the counter looked at me like I was just dead, and I felt like that big. And that's the first time I remember thinking something is wrong, but I didn't do anything about it. I didn't know who to talk to. I don't think I wanted to talk to anyone. I think I just hoped it was going to go away, that I was going to wake up one morning and I wouldn't want to drink. So, as I say, pushed it all down, drank it down, to be honest. Every time I started to feel anxious about it, I'd have a drink and it'd go away. Every time I started thinking about it, I'd have a drink and it'd go away. I think I was hoping for like some fairy tale ending. I'd somehow get a great job and I wouldn't want to drink because of it, or something would happen. And so I carried on for a few months until I realised that things weren't changing. So I had the great idea that I would go back home. I'd come back home up to the Wirral. And that's when I thought, and then I'll get a job, everything will be different, I'll be in a different place, I'll have different friends, and I'll stop. So I came back home. Obviously, I moved, but I brought myself with me. So nothing did change. For the first few months I was back living with my parents, I could sort of sneak drinks. The house they were living in at the time, it was quite a big house, and they had a bar which had like spirits and stuff in. So I'd go in and like help myself to stuff and like refill the bottles with water and, you know, refill the whiskey with tea, all the stuff that I'm sure sounds very familiar to us, thinking I was being really clever. Obviously they realised, probably when Dad went to get a drink and wondered why he was drinking water. Had a big fight. Well, I say fight, they shouted and I cried, and they said, you can't carry on like this, you have to stop. And I said, yes, I do. And I just stopped dead. Now, I've been drinking over a year by then, every day. I had absolutely no knowledge of anything to do with alcohol. I didn't realise it was dangerous to stop dead when you were at the point that I was. But I did, I stopped dead. I thought I'll be ill for a couple of days and then I'll just carry on. And I was violently ill for the first day. I was throwing up every like 10 minutes and every 5 minutes and every 2. And then I started fitting, which was really frightening from parents. I don't remember a lot about it. They called an ambulance in the end. They said I had a massive fit. They called an ambulance. I woke up in A&E. I'd had another massive fit when the ambulance guys arrived. I had a tube down my throat. I was in intensive care. And they told my parents if they'd left it half an hour or so later that I'd have died. So it was pretty scary stuff. And I was in hospital for about 2 weeks. Sorry, I'm just checking my time here. I'm all right. And while I was there, obviously, I didn't have anything to drink. I completely detoxed off it. And I thought, right, that was a big scare. I'm going to go out now, sort myself out, get a job, don't need a drink. And I came out, and I think I lasted 3 days. Now, bearing in mind, I'd almost died. So obviously my thinking wasn't right, but I thought to myself, yeah, but this time's going to be different because I know now the risks. So I'm not going to drink like before, I'll only drink at the weekend, and I'll only drink after 7, and I won't have a few bottles, I'll have one. And obviously it all fell apart really quickly. It took about less than a week before I was straight back to drinking first thing in the morning. I've always been someone who drank in the morning. I didn't build up to that, I've always done that. my solution to a hangover was to drink. And this started a pattern. I would drink for a few months, constantly, hiding it, denying it. My parents would say, "You're drinking." I'd say, "No, I'm not," as I slid down a wall. I'd get very, very defensive over stuff. I'd get in with like a bottle in my bag. My mum would want to look in my bag and I'd get really defensive. "Don't trust me," and all the rest of it. Then eventually it gets to the point where it just overcame me, because I am not a functioning alcoholic. When I drink, I can't do anything else. I don't do anything else. I literally drink. That's it. I can't hold down a job. I can't do anything. Then it gets to the point where I just have to stop. The way I react, if I even cut down once I'm drinking to that level, I fit. So I'd end up in hospital again. I'd detox there, and we'd go rounds in circles. I'd come out, I'd make all the promises. I'd maybe be able to stop for 3 months, I think was the best at first. And then something would happen that upset me and I'd start again. Or I'd just get fed up. Or I'd just think, I can do it now. So this went on for years. This must have gone on for, between me being 21 and 28, I was doing this, and it's very tiring to do. So when I was 28, my parents said to me again, "Right, you're going to go into a rehab. You obviously can't do this yourself, you're going to go into a rehab." And I was like, "Okay, you know what, I'll give it a go." Wasn't 100%, but I'll give it a go. So I came out of hospital because I just stopped and fitted, and I went to a rehab in Colwyn Bay. And I hated it. I wasn't ready to do it. It wasn't the right place for me. It was very aggressive. The groups that were there were all about, instead of sort of talking to each other, they were accusing each other. People were very confrontational. That's not me at all. I get very scared of confrontation and I just withdraw into myself. So after 3 months there, I relapsed. I went out into town one day. I went straight to the off licence and I bought a bottle of vodka. And I did that for a few days actually before I owned up, because I got away with it. Doesn't really say a lot about the rehab. I owned up, got thrown out, had to go home in disgrace. And off I went again, made all the promises in the world. I'll go to AA, I said this time. So I started going to AA meetings. And I sort of liked them because I identified with what people said. But I didn't get the sort of God thing, even though people say it's not a religious programme, and I understand that now. Then I was looking for, as they say in AA, look for the similarities, not the differences. I was looking for the differences. So I sat in meetings thinking, you're all older than me, I've never been arrested, I've never done this, I've not lost my family, this isn't me, I've got a degree. I was very kind of stuck up, to be honest. And I'd do things like I'd go to a meeting and buy a bottle of wine on the way back, and so I could come in and say to my parents, "Oh yay, I've been to a meeting," and go upstairs and drink the bottle of wine. Thought I was really clever. And again, this went on for years. And it got to the point where I just kind of didn't know what to do. It's weird. It's all that stuff that you start drinking for mad reasons sometimes. So if you're me, you start drinking to give yourself a little bit of confidence, because I'm quite anxious in social situations. I do get very nervous about stuff, so it's that social lubricant, isn't it? It gives you that Dutch courage, as they say. And all that stuff that it gave me initially, it took away. All that confidence went, and it didn't matter how much I drank, it just had gone completely. And the more I drank, the more anxious I got. So it was like my world got smaller and smaller. The more I drank, the more frightened I was to go outside. The more I drank, the less I wanted to interact with people. So yeah, my world went from like a community to a room. It was literally a room. I wouldn't leave a room except to go to the shop to get more wine. And as these things do, it went downhill again. I went into a residential detox, I think 4 or 5 times, where you stay and they medically detox you. And every time I came out and said this time it'd be different, and every time it wasn't different, because I didn't do anything different. I started doing things like stealing. I stole from my parents. If they left a purse around, I'd steal money from the purse. If I couldn't do that, I started to shoplift. I'd go to shops and like stick a bottle of wine in my bag and walk out but I'm the worst shoplifter in the world, so I got arrested quite a bit. I ended up in the cells one night, had to go into magistrate's court in the day, which is not a fun experience. So that was kind of where I was. In the end, my parents threw me out of their house, quite rightly, because I was just a nightmare. And I went to live with my sister, who was still on drugs at that time. She was living with her boyfriend, who was a drug dealer. They were living in what was essentially a crack den, because she'd started smoking crack by then. And I slept on the couch there for a good 6 months. And that was a real low point. They were off their head all day. I'd wake up in the morning, go to the shop, rob something, come in, drink it, have a bit more courage maybe to go out and rob more, and that'd be it. And the obsession around alcohol was insane. I mean, from the second I woke up, usually I would hardly sleep. I'd be awake from 3 o'clock panicking because I'd have nothing left, and it's that real anxiety deep in the pit of your stomach. You feel like can't breathe. And I'd be having panic attacks and withdrawal. And that would last until I would actually go out and like either buy or steal it. And it was weird. As soon as I got to a shop and I had it, all that anxiety would go, even though I hadn't opened it or drank anything. Just the act of having it would stop it, which shows what a huge psychological grip it had on me as well. But I literally couldn't go an hour without having a drink at this stage. I was a complete mess. I wasn't eating anymore either. I'd stopped eating. I'd eat maybe a couple of grapes a day. That'd be it. I just physically couldn't have anything to eat. And I went down to about 7 stone, I think. Anything I did eat, I'd just bring back up again. So I ended up back in hospital again, for I couldn't even tell you how many times. And I ended up in medical detox again. And this time I came out, this is in 2013, I think it was, 2013. And when I came out of detox, I heard about a place in Liverpool called Sharp, which is a community rehab. And it's just like a normal rehab, but you go 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so it's not residential, you don't live there, which I thought that's good because I'll sort of learn how to live in the world as well. I'm not locked away. So I went there as soon as I got out of detox. I went over to Liverpool, referred myself there, and went through their programme. Now, I'd love to say I went through their programme, graduated, and I've been sober ever since. That's not what happened. I went through their programme, which involved a lot of group therapy, and I nodded and I smiled and I filled in the forms that they told me to fill in, and I said I'd listened. I did everything that I'd done in school to be like top of the class. I asked all the right questions and I didn't take any of it in. I graduated. I started their aftercare programme, which lasted for a year. And I wondered why I just didn't feel right. I thought, I've stopped drinking, I should be happy. And I wasn't. My head was a million miles an hour. I was really anxious all the time. Looking back, all I'd done is just stop drinking. I hadn't changed anything else about my life. I hadn't changed how I reacted with people. Everything was the same. I lasted 8 months and then I relapsed a couple of times and managed to sort of bring it back again. And then I think it was June in 2015, I relapsed really badly. For 2 weeks solid, I didn't leave my flat. It was actually this flat. And I just drank 24 hours a day. Sat on this couch 24 hours a day, and oh no, not this couch, it's a different couch, and just drank. And my mum didn't come to see me. She used to do, she'd come and see me with a bottle of wine in the morning because she was really frightened of me going into withdrawal, and I took full advantage of that. I was very manipulative, as we are when we drink. And I would say that I'd make the bottle last all day. It would last about 10 minutes. As soon as she'd gone out the door, I would have 2 massive pint glasses. Once I'd managed to make the first one stay down, by usually clapping my hand over my mouth to stop myself throwing it back up again, I'd get the other one down in 10 minutes. And then I'd be like, now I can go to the shop and rob another one. But this time, her doctor said to her, whatever you do, don't go and see her. You're enabling her. And as long as you enable her, she's never going to stop. And he was absolutely right. The best advice he could have given her completely. At the time, I hated her. I used to lie on the couch and think how sorry they'd all be when I was dead and how they'd all cry at my funeral. And, you know, all the real self-pity that you get when you're drinking. Poor me, it's everyone else's fault. No one loved me. After 2 weeks, I phoned an ambulance because I knew I was fitting, because I woke up and I'd bitten on my tongue and I knew it was all going downhill. And I ended up in hospital again and in detox again. And I did genuinely think then, maybe I'm just one of those people who can't stop, because I'd seen other people get sober and I just didn't understand what I wasn't getting. I thought maybe this is just my destiny. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just going to drink myself to death and that's it. It doesn't matter what I do. I can't do it. And someone said to me, why don't you try Sharp again? So I phoned them when I was in there, and I remember the lovely lady who answered the phone, Kathy. I said, can I come back to Sharp? I've relapsed. And I always remember she said, all right, we'll put you through the wash again and we'll see if you come out clean this time. So I went back. I had to go back for an assessment, which was horrible, because even though as a drinker I had no self-esteem, I had a huge ego and thought I was better than everyone else. So to go back and admit that I had failed was huge for me. But they welcomed me back with open arms, and I did the programme again. But this time, let me just check where I am with time. Cool. Something different happened. I had a session with a counsellor, Theo, and he said to me, when something upsets you, what do you do? And I said, well, I think about it, I analyse the situation, and then I just carry on. He said, no, when something upsets you, what do you do with the feeling? And I kept saying like a robot, I think about the situation, I analyse what's happened, and I move on. And I did not understand what he meant. And he said, the feeling, what do you do with the feeling? If someone makes you feel sad, what do you do with the feeling? And I just looked at him and said, nothing. What do you mean? I don't know. I just ignore it. And he said, that's your problem. What you're doing is every time something happens that upsets you or makes you anxious, you're pushing it down. So eventually it gets to a point where, you can see my hand, it builds up and you can't cope with it anymore because you can't keep pushing it down. Then you drink, because that's the only way you know to stop how you're feeling. Obviously that makes everything worse, it spirals, you go on a big binge, it ends up with you fitting, you're in hospital, it's all drama and it all comes out, and then you feel better. And then you start all over again. That's what you're doing this cycle. And it really rang true. I remember I burst into tears in the middle of this office, and I was like, oh my God, you're right, that's what I'm doing. And he said, you have to start talking about what bothers you. You have to start talking about your feelings. You're going to have to start practicing it, because otherwise you're going to go out and you're going to do it again. So that's what I did. I started to talk, because there's a lot of group therapy at Sharp, I started to talk about how I felt. All the stuff that I kept down for years. Things like how I was afraid no one liked me, how I was afraid that I was just a big failure, how I was really afraid that if I stopped drinking, I'd still be this horrific person. You know, when people drink, they're like, oh, it's just the drink, they're really nice otherwise. I kept thinking, what if it's not? What if it's me? What if I am just horrible? So all this nonsense started coming out, and weird things like my behaviours. I had terrible behaviours around like guys, thinking I was a real ladette around guys, and it was just all this stuff I had going on was just eating me up. So I started to talk about it in groups, and you know what? No one judged me. Every single thing I came out with, even the worst things I thought I'd done ever, someone had done something worse, or someone knew exactly what I was talking about. And I found that anxiety and that tension I had inside me constantly, and that racing brain that I had where my mind wouldn't shut up, started to relax. So for me, that was a huge thing, and this is what I tell people now. Talk about what's going on for you. It doesn't have to be to anyone you know. It could be someone on Club Soda. It could be, you could phone the Samaritans if you have to and just ramble at them, as long as you're getting it out. The more you're storing stuff in, the worse you're going to make it for yourself. Someone said to me, I think in therapy once, it's like if somewhere's completely black, like I felt inside, if you let a little bit of light in, the dark can't live there anymore. Oh, I know what it was. They said it's like a fungus. Fungus can only survive in the dark. Once you get the light in, it can't grow. that's what it was like with me. So I started doing that. That helped a lot. Also, this time I did what I hadn't done before. I'd spent 16 years thinking I could get better on my own, despite what everybody told me. It's absolute nonsense. You cannot get better in a vacuum. I am here to tell you it's not going to happen. So this time I got myself a great support network. I have a lot of really good friends. A lot of them went through rehab with me. Some of them didn't, but I have people I can call if I'm stressed out, if I'm in a situation where I think I might drink. I can call someone. I don't have to deal with it myself. That was a huge thing. I have Club Soda, which is brilliant because sometimes you don't have people you can go out for a coffee with. Sometimes that's not how things are. But now I find if I can't get out, if I go into Club Soda and I type it out, it's pretty much as good as talking to someone. It's getting it out there. It's that old thing, isn't it, of a problem shared is a problem halved. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's absolutely true. So I did that, got a huge support network, and we bang on about this in Club Soda, I started to plan stuff when I was nervous about it. Like the first time I went to a do, I planned. We always say plan an exit strategy. So, because there were so many times when I was trying not to drink and someone would offer me a drink and I'd have it out of embarrassment because I didn't know how to say no. So I had to practice things like that. I'd have I remember I went to a do and I was like, right, if I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to go to the toilet, I'm going to text a friend, and I'm just going to leave straight away. Or I'm going to phone somebody, I'm going to arrive early, and then I'll stay an hour, and then I'll leave. And I finally got my head around the stuff, things like, you can leave a party early. Nobody cares. I don't know what I thought was going to happen if I said I was going to leave a party early, the whole party would stop. Nobody notices if you leave a party early. As long as you get there, see the house, say hi. I don't make a big thing when I leave. I just sidle out. And most of the time, no one even notices. Bit of a blow to the ego that nobody really notices that I'm not there. So I started practicing all of this. It was a lot of different things. I did go to AA for the first year, but then after a lot of thought, I stopped going. It's not for me. It is for other people. It's absolutely brilliant. A lot of my friends absolutely swear by AA. They love it to death. Not really for me. But what I find works for me is I had my year of aftercare, and I still meet with a lot of my friends in aftercare. We meet once a week. We call it Aftercare Plus. We don't have the counsellors anymore, but we all meet up and we talk to each other. We know each other really well, and that does for me. I started doing voluntary work. I go to schools with the Amy Winehouse Foundation. It's something called the Resilience Project, and I tell them pretty much what I've just told you about my life, and I talk to them about alcohol and how, if they're changing how they're feeling, maybe they want to think about why they're doing it. And it's been great. So where I am now is I am coming up to, in July, 4th of July this year, I will be 2 years sober, which is an absolute miracle. Even saying that just blows my mind, because I literally couldn't go an hour without a drink. So if you'd said to me, you will go 2 years, I wouldn't have believed you for a second. That's where I am now. I still have my own flat. I have a cat who's now disappeared. I don't know what she's doing. She's around. I'll see if we can find her in a second. I've just started looking for work. It took me a good 18 months before I felt like I was ready to start looking for work. That's a little bit of a struggle at the minute. I was letting that get me down a little bit till last week, until talking to one of my friends in recovery, and they quite rightly said, look at the positive in it. If you were working, you wouldn't be able to do your voluntary work. You've got a great opportunity to do other voluntary stuff that I haven't applied for because I've just been mooching around thinking I want to have a job. So I've changed my thinking about all that and thought, you know what, I'm going to apply for loads of different voluntary stuff. That'll be great, get loads of experience. So that's where I am now. And yeah, the big message I always say to people is, A, you're not on your own. You always think you're on your own when you're drinking. You think everyone else is fine. You're not a failure if you drink. If you're trying to stop and you drink, you're not a failure. I hate it when I see people say, oh, I failed again, because I feel like shaking them and saying, you haven't failed. You've just learned something. I tried to stop 1,000,001 times before it clicked. Someone said to me once, when I was really down about it, she said, You just have to keep trying. She said, and one day it will click and it won't be hard. And that's what's happened this time. But there were 1,000,001 hard times that it didn't work. It wasn't the right time for me. I hadn't listened to what people were saying. And I started listening and started talking, and they were the two big things. So yeah, get all the support you can. Phone numbers, for Google places. I mean, the internet's brilliant now. You can find out what services are in your area. Absolutely do that. Club Soda is just so brilliant. There's so many people here with lots of experience, and you can just chew their ear off, and they won't mind. So yeah, that's it. I think that's where I'm up to. As I say, any questions or anything, please feel free to send me a question or messenger me, and I'll absolutely reply to you. Just before I go, this is just for a few of you. I'll see if I can get hold of the cat. She's in the bedroom, I think, but if I do this, she usually comes running. I can hear her coming. Bear with me. Come here. This is Scout. She's a pain. She's almost a year as well, and she's sober. So there we go. I hope you have a lovely evening, and thank you for listening to me ramble on. See you later. Bye-bye.